Am I one? Okay, hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to the APG's fourth Noisy Thinking for this year. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Newman, I'm the APG's director. Welcome to you all. I'd like to say first of all a couple of thank yous. First of all to Google, our very generous host, who have once again given us this fantastic space for the evening and lovely drinks beforehand and the chance to have a chat. And I think, Nate, the opportunity afterwards to maybe adjourn for another. Possibly not, we'll see how that goes. Yeah. But anyway, thank you very much for your generosity. Thank you also to Flamingo, our sponsor, without whom we couldn't put on this fantastic series. We're very grateful to you. Tonight's theme, on the auspicious night of the 5th of November, is about content. I was going to make some laboured jokes about intellectual fireworks, this being a plenary kind of evening, but I guess you could do without those. We're going to be talking about content. It's a great big baggy word, has lots of associations, lots of opinions about it, and I think in APG style it's time to unpack it a little bit and understand a little bit more what we mean by it. It was very interesting for us, having just done the APG Creative Strategy Awards 2013, being involved in the shortlisting and the judging process, to see how involved planners were getting in all kinds of content, thought and execution. One of the prizes we gave was to a planner who came up with a television series. It wouldn't have been done 2 years ago. Clearly there's an awful lot going on in the area. We want to know more about it. So we asked ourselves, well, what is the line between advertising and content? And in also classic plenary fashion, does it actually matter? I think maybe one of our speakers in particular will say it doesn't, but we'll wait to hear what he's got to say as the evening goes on. So this evening we've got three wonderful speakers. We have Nick Price, who describes himself as a branded content entrepreneur. I will say that again. Who describes himself as a branded content entrepreneur. He has the most amazing CV. He has degrees in business and languages. He also has a degree in film. He's been a TV producer and he's worked for media agencies, and he is the newly crowned head of content at Abermead Vickers BBDO. He's not a planner, but he's had a big 5 weeks worth of immersion, I think, in an advertising creative culture, and I think he's got a lot to say about that as a result. Second up, we're delighted to have Kirsty Sadler, who's the head of strategy at BBH, who's also worked in London and in New York at top agencies, and now has possibly one of the top planning jobs, I'd say, in town, which is great. She's a leading light in the APG, and she helped us with the Creative Strategy Awards shortlisting, and I think that might have given her a very interesting view on what's going on out there, and she might want to talk about that and what's going on at BBH as well. We always want to lift the lid on that and see what you're up to. And finally, our very good friend Nathan Guerra from Google, also a digital and content polymath, if there is such a thing. He has a degree in theatre, not film. He has a stint at an internet startup. He used to be Director of Innovation at Abermead Vickers, and he's now a creative industry head at Google. He describes himself as pretty nifty, and I think I can attest to that in every way. He's also particularly good at standing on the door and letting you all in on these evenings, so thank you for that as well, Nate. So without much more ado, I'd like to welcome Nick onto the stage to let us know what he thinks. Thank you, Nick.
Hi there. So yeah, maybe a little bit about my background. I started life out in life as a TV producer, obviously professionally, not literally. And from there started to engage with brands after many years of working in TV shows, started doing a lot of advertiser-funded shows, and then basically migrated through, had my own agency, worked for Havas Media, started doing a lot of work with online interactive content, again, more TV, YouTube channels, all that kind of stuff. So, and made ads, and along the way, kind of had all the touch points that you can get into in advertising, and learn a lot of good and sometimes hard lessons about the different ways of working in each of these environments. So largely, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is that. And the first thing, when I first saw this question, I was kind of like, great, fantastic question. But actually, you can answer that in a second, is all content. You know, you could just literally walk off the stage because that is the answer. So I wanted to reframe it slightly. And I think it's all about how we get the balance right between the traditional advertising and entertainment. Whether or not we say that entertainment is advertising, that's what the kind of balance is. And once upon a time, the kind of one-size-fits-all did work. We all went to watch TV shows, we watched the ads, got all the messaging out there. There was a bit of print, bit of out of home. It was a relatively simple world. Nowadays, when we're in an always-on culture, people can get the entertainment they want, when they want, how they want. Everything has changed. So for me, you cannot make an ad that is all about entertainment and has all your core brand messages in it at the same time. But there might be an ad that can do that. But largely speaking, there is somewhere along this continuum that you're always pitching yourself in any creative work you are doing. And an example of maybe how it works in a good way, there's another story behind this, is East Coast Feel at Home campaign. Now, East Coast, running Feel at Home ads at the minute, all about when you're on the train, it's like being at home, so on and so forth, all very nice. If in an advert you say 80% of our trains run on time, we're fabulous, people don't tend to believe you, obviously. So at the other end, there's a TV show coming out next week, 8 o'clock, Sky One, which is all aboard East Coast trains. Now, in this show, you actually get, like any of those shows like Airline, any of those kind of things, you actually get, like the characters, understand the things. If there's a tree drops on a train line up the East Coast, you see all the problems, how they're overcoming it in the control room, the person who's been screamed at the station. It creates a real believability, a real brand credibility that simply does not exist at the other end. You can say to you, blue in the face, we're lovely, love us. The reality is it's this stuff at the other end will do that. And then in the middle, they started, Sky One have got involved and they started branding the trains. So a lot of the trains are wrapped in Sky One colours and you get Sky subscriptions, just making it kind of a nicer campaign. The reality about this campaign, though, is those two ends weren't actually linked in reality. This TV show is a TV show I did when I was at Havas Media, which is coming out. At the time, when the inception of that idea came out, the East Coast advertising was actually my current agency, AMV, that's since moved. And it was just a happy coincidence those two came together and actually created a fairly complete story. And that is a theme that runs through this. A lot of the time, the links are slightly broken, what we try and do, and I think that's something we can massively improve. And that kind of brings me to what I call the creative integration conundrum. I think in advertising, what we do fantastically well is create that brand message, is understand the brand inside out, what the consumer wants, how to communicate them, focus group the hell out of it, know everything, script it, recheck it, and eventually make a very, very scripted piece of creative that ultimately we know is exactly what the brand wants and what the agency wants, and it gets the message across to your customer. It just simply does not work when employed in entertainment. It kills the ideas, it waters them down, because actually most entertainment is a much more subjective thing. It is truly led by creatives, and you have to be able to take a step back and go, okay, what job is that doing for my brand? And actually trust in the fact that all the other stuff you're doing at the other end, which is all the hardcore kind of advertising or the print, all that kind of stuff, is doing the other message, and you're covering off that whole kind of continuum between the two. An example of, and I'm sorry if anyone in the room was involved in Guinness, you might think this was a fantastic example. Again, an AMV brand, we weren't involved in this. I can see where this came from as a concept and why this was nice. I'm not sure, has everyone seen the Guinness ad in, the Guinness Jonathan Ross thing? Well, I'll play a bit of it and you can see it, and then I'll talk about it.
Now, I hope you've seen the new Guinness advert, which I think you'll agree is pretty powerful and might have made you think about friendship and the choices we make about spending time with our friends, which is kind of why I'm here right now. And I'm being joined by my guest, Danny Wallace, and Professor Robin Dunbar to explain more. Danny, good to see you.
How are you?
Robin, nice to meet you. Okay, so explain to me, why are we here?
Science is why we're here. I don't know if you saw the last ad break. You might have been too busy schmoozing. If you had seen it, you'd have seen me and Robin discussing the importance of friendship and hanging out with your friends and how it benefits you as a man physically and emotionally.
Well, that's a pretty big claim. I hope there's some genuine science to back that up. Is there, Robin?
Oh, there is, yeah. So it turns out that...
Anyway, that's probably... Oh, want to go back one? There we go. Basically, I think what they were trying to do there, and wasn't involved, so I can't say for certain, is the ad, which was whole bunch of people playing basketball in wheelchairs. Only one of them actually can't walk. And it's the whole thing about mates. They were trying to bring that to life in an entertainment context. And I think from a media perspective, they probably thought, okay, we're going to play this in Jonathan Ross. How about we take out the ad breaks? How about we do some entertainment in the ad breaks? How about we make it look like the Jonathan Ross show in the ad breaks? All actually quite nice sound ideas. Where it fell down is kind of a creative twilight zone where it's fallen midway between genuine entertainment and advertising. And I think that is exactly what we have to try to avoid. And actually, for me, even though we weren't involved, that is actually a great shame, because that was an opportunity to do something really quite cool. And actually, the way Jonathan Ross interacted with that, the way that the staging was done, it's not even the canned laughter, it's the canned clapping. It just, for me, I don't know, it might work for some people. For me, that just didn't do it in the way it should have done it. And that brings me to the next point, which is a slightly dramatic kind of image of Clint Eastwood, trying to kill entertainment by committee. The whole focus group. I've been involved in conversations on a brand recently about focus groups talking about things we shouldn't do entertainment because it might not work. And I was sitting there going, the thing is, if, I'm not going to mention the brand, if we do that for the brand, we are just going to create the most dull bit of content ever. And actually, this, again, comes back to that nub. People, they have to allow the creatives to run with this stuff. And there was a speech recently given, it's related, by Kevin Spacey at the Guardian Edinburgh International TV Festival, which illustrates this in a far more eloquent way than I ever could, where he talks about the American way of running focus groups into pilots, which then decide whether those pilots become TV shows. And it is related because exactly the same thing happens in our industry when we get into content and start talking about that. So I'll play this because he does it much better than me.
Now, Brett Martin, in his new book, Difficult Men, a behind-the-scenes look at the past 15 years of what he calls the third golden age of television, cites a very revealing story about what creatives have had to deal with since the beginning of this medium. When the hit series Hill Street Blues was about to premiere in 1980, NBC sent an internal memo to writer-showrunner Stephen Bochco with a list of their concerns following a focus group testing of that program. The most prevalent audience reaction indicated that the program was depressing, violent, and confusing. Too much was crammed into the story. The main characters are perceived as not being capable and having flawed personalities. Professionally, they were never completely successful in doing their jobs, and personally, their lives were a mess. Audiences found the ending unsatisfying, too many loose ends, etc., etc. Now, in other words, this memo was an entirely unwitting blueprint for not only what made Hill Street Blues such a historic program, but for all the shows that make up this third golden age. If those executives had had their way, the road would have never been paved for The Sopranos, Rescue Me, Homeland, 6 Feet Under, Dexter, Damages, Sons of Anarchy, Oz, The Wire, True Blood, Boardwalk Empire, Mad Men, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and House of Cards. And if the list I just read of those programs is not the most powerful, inescapable evidence that the king of television is the creatives, then I don't know what would convince you. You can applaud.
So it's worth actually Googling that and watching the whole piece. It's an hour-long speech, but it's a phenomenal speech he gave. And that brings us on to one of the other questions that was in the brief we got given. Are agencies equipped to plan and execute content that people actually want to engage with? And I think yes, is the reality. The problem isn't the ideas. What agencies do, they do understand their audiences very well. They do understand their brands well. They do understand how to get people to take some form of action. That isn't the problem. The problem is coming back to that initial chart I had, which is understanding the role and power of content and how to execute it. You know, how you make content is entirely different to how you make traditional advertising. and again, within content, whether you're making something for a YouTube channel or you're making a TV show, or there are nuances within it, it's a much freer flow kind of form of production than you ever get in advertising. In fact, if I go back to East Coast Trains, when we actually were talking to them about making a TV series, they said, oh God, you're not going to turn up with 3 lorries, are you, and want to close the whole East Coast line, because that's what happened when you made the ads. And we were like, no, we're going to have like 4 or 5 crews of 3-man crews up and down the line, basically for about 6 or 7 weeks, filming everything we want, and that's how you do it. The per second cost is obviously a fraction of what advertising costs, but actually the overall cost of the series is quite expensive. That is a key thing. How we make it, we're understanding that. How we measure it. For many years when I was doing advertiser-funded shows, media agencies would literally just say, okay, sponsorship bumpers, front and end, your program is worth £120,000. And it costs $1 million to make, so therefore it's not worth doing. Really just ridiculous, actually. Now it's moved on quite a lot, but actually the measurement is still quite a tough side of it. People at least recognize that within something like an East Coast Train series, there is clearly a value because you see the brand at work, there's a likability factor, you sort of explain things. How to distribute it. Again, this is, having come from a media agency, I have a lot of opinions about them, the things that do well, things not so well. Sure, you can put £100,000 behind driving people to a YouTube channel or wherever it happens to be, or to a bit of pre-roll, but those people might only spend 3 or 4 seconds watching something. The dwell time is normally terrible. The reality of where it needs to be placed, particularly if it's on something like YouTube, is it's all through those YouTube stars, it's through the earned media. That's where the power is, because that's where you get people actually saying, I want to watch this, I'm going to watch the whole thing. How to sell it, again, explaining this to brands, how it's different, how the process is different, how it really, really works. And then finally, how we integrate it, how we bring that big umbrella idea and say, these are all the different bits of creative we're doing, they work in a different way, but they're doing all the jobs we need them to do in the right places. And that also means agencies have to learn a whole new way of working. And it also means we have to let go, not of the way we make ads, that works really well, but we do have to let go of trying to employ those kind of methods within the contents arena and how we make that kind of stuff. And ultimately, and I'll get onto some of the channels of that in a second, is, success in this area, the only success is based on, is it an entertaining piece of content? Do people want to watch it? What is its entertainment promise? And that is different to a brand promise. And I was looking just top of my head on television, thinking of these 6 shows: Airport, One Born Every Minute, Eddie Stobart Truckers, the new one that BBC Two is doing, Life in the Freezer Cabinet, which is about Iceland, The Tube, 24 Hours in A&E. Any one of those could have actually been funded by the brand behind them, but they're all hit shows in their own rights. However, I feel that the way we work at the minute, if a brand had funded any of those, they would not have been as successful because they would have been watered down, and actually we would have lost something in the process. And then, of course, you come into the really big player now in terms of what proves the model in the world of YouTube. You have people like Pixie Woo, a couple of makeup artists, 1.4 million subscribers. People watch them in their millions because they're young women wanting to learn makeup tricks. They like the characters. Now brands are starting to interact with them and start doing product placement deals, basically, but those guys will only work with brands they actually believe in. You'd go one step further on, you've got Jamie Oliver. People would think of him as an entertainer. He is actually a huge brand now in his own right. FoodTube, 500,000 subscribers in 6 months. That's enormous. 23 million views. He's launching new channels. And brands increasingly are getting are becoming a part of the content. And interestingly, last night we did a live show with Uncle Ben's with him. That's part traditional advertising, it's kind of part banners, but also they are becoming the ad. But they're becoming the ad in a credible way where people actually tune in and watch it, and they watch the whole thing. That's far more powerful, I'd argue, for Uncle Ben's than just a traditional advert sitting on its own somewhere, which people go, fine, it's rice. Try to get that or Tilda. And then the daddy of them, Red Bull, who, as we all know, kind of many years ago, created this brand promise that now means they don't do traditional advertising any longer. It's all around their events. It's all around their YouTube channels. And, the Stratus jump, 35 million views. I think they turned off the couch. I'm not sure if that's right or not, but it's enormous. And that's where not every brand could be there, but there are certain brands can emulate that and can emulate that kind of promise and deliver those kind of audiences. These guys now make things. I made I filmed the Flug tag for them for ITV. At that point, they paid for it. They don't pay for those shows any longer. The broadcasters pay for it because their events are so big and so many people want to watch them, they need to cover them. That's an amazing story. And that's kind of where the future is. And then, of course, in the social and interactive arena, brands very successful in this, often kind of little micro campaigns, tactical campaigns, which I feel, sometimes they're integrated, sometimes they're not. But we've all seen the huge growth in this area, and there's been some amazing, incredible work. Interesting, Nationwide over there now doing comedy stuff for mortgages. Who Killed Dion, which is a highly successful thing for the police, an interactive YouTube channel. The Mariachi Band, one of ours, started as a Facebook thing that turned into advertising, that now the other night we're doing a Snapchat session with them on Halloween, so that you're actually responding to people in real time with songs for them. Really nice, clever ways for brands to really become the engaged party and do their advertising at the same time. So anyway, that area as well, fantastically interesting. But it all comes back, for me, for the future, for creative agencies in particular, about creating that big umbrella. What is that big idea, and how do all of these things hang off it? And not mixing up what that TV ad over there does, which is the hard sell, the call to action, with what a YouTube channel, a TV show, or a piece of social interactive content can do, which is give you really good dwell times, give you massive credibility. They all have to be working together. But for someone like AMV, this bit, all down here, is an entirely different way of working to that bit. And that, effectively, is the big challenge for those agencies to get it right. But get it right, and I think you'll see the kind of level of work that we're doing kind of really increase. And then a few final thoughts. I don't know if I've used my 20 minutes. I have used, I'm on time, apparently. Brands have to commit to this stuff. I don't think you can stick, as an agency or a brand, you can stick your head in the sand with it. The entertainment factor is there. People want it. They will only engage stuff that they want. People do tune out of ads. They do go and make a cup of tea if they're just watching television. Sometimes they watch them, but actually look at when people online watch ads, how often do they click off after 4 seconds? There's a huge amount of wastage in there. I think if they don't engage with entertainment and they don't do entertainment well, they will ultimately just damage themselves. Will they survive long term? And that's a particular threat, I think, for agencies. To make that happen, agencies have to work in different ways. They have to help brands understand that these rules are different. They work in different ways, but actually there's a huge opportunity. And finally, the big one for me is an ad isn't an asset in terms of you can sell it internationally or anything. It's just a piece of collateral, really. But an entertainment channel, whether it's a YouTube channel you own that you can run advertising on, or whether, frankly, a big brand said, you know what, we want to get into format creation. Group M is already investing in shows all the time. But why couldn't a brand create an X Factor series or something like that and own it and do clever things around it? And the market I came from, the TV world, all those businesses grow into big businesses because they own the rights to this stuff and they go out and they sell it internationally. I can see a world not too far off where brands are doing really successful entertainment formats or YouTube channels or whatever they happen to be that become either fully or partially self-funding because actually they're giving people things that either they get for free or they really want or they're willing to pay for in some shape or form, or other people are willing to pay for, whether it's other advertisers or broadcasters, to get that kind of content. And that's my 20-minute download.
Thank you very much. Hello. Right, so coming from a slightly different perspective, and obviously quite a lot of this kind of comes from within the BBH family and things that we've worked on, but I wanted to go to a different place, and that place is further away from here. It's the West Coast, and I think that probably sort of starts to frame one of the ways I think we look at this, and it's the idea that really content needs to be entertainment. And it kind of feels that this individual, it's almost, he is a content brand himself. So he has more followers than the population of South Africa, and that's on Twitter. And his management claim that the activity on Twitter about him can take up 4% of Twitter's servers, which I think is quite phenomenal. But he's a tween sensation, and he has been launched in digital, which I think is obviously another big theme to this, really, is how digital is affecting the lines between advertising and content. And also I think there's something about the fact that, he is a youth brand. And so I think that he's obviously playing to, but also then like feeding off the habits and attitudes of a younger generation. And so his manager actually is quoted as saying, what we introduced was a new philosophy. So showing that if the number one retailer in music was iTunes, why shouldn't the number one marketing avenue be the internet? So there is a truth, which is that people pay for entertainment and they are increasingly paying to avoid advertising. So, you know, people have always paid for entertainment. They've gone to the cinema, the theatre, that sort of thing. But I think that as people are decreasing the amount of television that they watch or books that they read, they are increasing the amount they are prepared to pay for content, which I think is quite interesting. I think we are seeing a move from people just being happy with, I'll just get the content that I can for free. People do want the quality, and particularly in the UK, we're seeing that expenditure go up. And I think this was for us a founding principle for BBHLA, which we launched about 2008, 2009. And I think it was this idea of seeing an opportunity to better sort of understand, emulate, but also be part of evolving the entertainment industry. Because actually, to be honest, we've got similar issues really, in that the entertainment industry's found that some of its formats and the way that it's done things, they're struggling with that. And so is advertising. And so it was born. And also this has, for us, in BBHLA, led to some partnerships with Bieber's manager, Scooter Braun. So that's another reason of using Bieber as someone to take learnings from. But I think that one of the first things for us is, when you think about Bieber and his brand, there's a big difference between fandom and likedom. And I think we would all like to think that, you know, brands that we work with and clients that we have, that they fully understand engagement and how you achieve that and the value of it. But I think there is still a truth. There's quite a rush for volume of likes. But at the end of the day, I mean, likes, they're sort of just fleeting. They're quite transient, really. I mean, you like someone's photo on Facebook, you probably don't even like them. And so I think that fans, however, you know, they're emotional, they're charged, you know, they're kind of with you. So back to Bieber, I think there is something about the fact that his fans are his platform. So, you know, when he was launched, there was this idea of putting him out there in a really organic way as a really young star in a really quite lo-fi manner. So it felt that the people that began to find his films, for them it was self-discovery, and they feel like they co-own part of his success. And I think the interesting point there as well is he's never forgotten that. So I think there is a very good interplay by the way he launched himself, has grown himself, and then is continuing to get a value back for the fans, but also reward them. They're kind of, he's the product, the content is the product, and they're all inextricably linked. One other thing, I think that just this idea of his fans are his platform. So apparently this year he's launching a movie around Christmas time. I don't know what it's about, but I think the interesting thing is he launched this idea of Music Mondays. So for 10 Mondays, every Monday leading up to the launch of his film, he releases a new music track. But there's, again, something very organic and authentic about it, because the repetitive nature of it, the way in which he launches it via things like Instagram, it's almost like those tracks are like a diary entry from him, because quite often they have been written quite recently. So again, it's that idea of he knows how his fans have helped build him and therefore want to have that continuous personal insight. They never seem to tire of it. But I think this idea as well is that the fans will spread the content, so his fans become his marketing leading up to this Christmas movie. I think there's another thing which, thinking about, you know, sort of Bieber, the way he's grown, but also sort of what brands see, there's quite a big difference between passion and that being a bigger thing than just aspiration. And I think that there's something here which is about trying to put your consumer more central to what your entertainment might be. Because I think that's something that he does exceptionally well. Another phenomenal thing, I think, is this idea of belieber buyouts. I mean, there's sites on this where it's all incredibly orchestrated, that all his fans find out when merchandise or an album is going to be released, and they will organise an event where they will rush the stores that are stocking this, and they will make every effort to buy every single last item in that day. And then they actually, you know, in kind of true sort of Bieber fashion, there's an altruism to it where he asks that they make that buyout, but then they donate and give away what they've bought. But I just think, again, that idea of the passion that he has from his fans and how they then fuel his success, and again, kind of him as content and him as product inextricably linked. So I think another good example that's already been pointed out, but is ASOS. So they launched in 2000. They launched as an e-commerce site for fashion. You know, that seemed the right sort of thing to do. But, and they started launching clothes, but then they went into their own catwalk. They went into having their own magazine. Then it went into blogging. And basically now its success is linked to the contribution of the fans and of their content, and to them helping fuel this overall passion for style. So they're kind of fielding and selling a passion for fashion and style, not just the aspiration to buy clothing. And I think, you know, that has led to them having a real breadth on their site and being far more than just a sales channel. And I think latterly now we're seeing H&M with something like And Other Stories beginning to try and emulate that. Arguably, you know, they are only doing it in the way that they're presenting their product, but they are still beginning to see that there's something where you get amazing repeat visit, repeat purchase and engagement when you have something that's more linked to people's real interest rather than just their momentary desire to buy something. Back to the point, I guess, around digital and the opportunity with that. There is obviously something around being able to identify interest through analysis. It means that your entertainment can be a little bit more calculated. You know, you can kind of set yourself up to identify what will be successful. I think, you know, another Braun phenomenon, Psy, it is worth looking at just because it was amazing bit of calculated content, and it was analysis that had them execute it in that way as a piece of entertainment, but then also as the sort of the seeding approach that they took. So when they kickstarted things in Korea, they actually chose through really seeing what was successful, what was most engaged with, what was being most searched. There is a kid who'd just previously caught the country's attention in Korea Got Talent. He features in the video. There's a famous South Korean comedian, if anybody who knows the video exceptionally well, he's in the yellow suit. Ironically, for a talk about content, I'm not showing any content. And there's a crotch-thrusting entertainer in the lift. But all three of those had clearly caught that like the younger generation's imagination via digital, and so that's why they picked them off. There is also just something about the fact that it's highly choreographed dance moves, which obviously then when you're spreading it, it gets picked up, so that gets seen. So, you know, amazing kind of approach to the propagation of it. And it's sort of, so it's this brilliant balance that you can achieve, I think, for entertainment through the analysis you can now do in digital, where it's just enough uniqueness, but just enough of what people know and love. In another example, which was touched on, House of Cards. I think there's something where, you know, that just again felt like it was a content channel, but now really it's entertainment e-commerce. I think that, you know, Netflix basically looked at the data again. It proved that Fincher was one of the most successful directors following Benjamin Button and The Social Network. Kevin Spacey is one of the most searched for actors of current times. And politics, again, it's a proven kind of theme or topic for entertainment formats. And also, of course, they could look and see that actually House of Cards was a very successful format here in the UK in the 90s. So they bought it out. And just the quote really, I think, from head of Netflix sums it up, which is, after David Fincher directs a series for Netflix, no one else can say, well, I'm not going to direct a series for the internet. And I think that idea where, again, they've kind of really smashed some conventions in entertainment where they launched, I think it's either the second or third series in its entirety. Because, again, it's putting people back in control of the content they want when they want it. And this idea of you don't have to wait, which is something that obviously film franchises and often on networks struggle with. And it got great critical acclaim. And I guess from a business point of view, they claim that that brought in 3 million more viewers or users to Netflix. So I think another point is then, if you're putting the you know, your consumer or your viewer at the heart, and you also have a lot of more flexibility within digital, there's this opportunity to be responsive, not just to respond. I think they're different things. So back to Bieber. He launched Girlfriend perfume, his second perfume. He's actually already launched his third, which I didn't know. But it's another proof, I think, of Bieber's fans being his platform. And I just think there's something very smart, again, about he was tweeting out asking, you know, reasons why you could be my girlfriend. And lots of girls, very self-deprecating, I wish I was more beautiful, I wish I was more talented, that sort of thing. Immediately, he picked up on those and direct tweeted them back. So that became content that then travelled, and that just helped further propagate the success of the perfume. And I think, remarkably, one of those perfume bottles sold every minute in its first week of launch in the UK. So again, that was probably a Belieber buyout at the perfume shop. But I think another example of this is something that we, I suppose, at BBH, feels like we did it relatively early, I think. But what the art of the trench. And I think the point here around responsiveness was that it sort of became like a living document of the trench coat and people who wear it. And it was a real collaboration between Burberry and some of the world's leading image makers, but then also some of the people that just wear this product. So it was kind of interesting that a big premium brand would do such a co-creation exercise back in 2009. And I think it was responsive to things like the sartorialist as well and the success of that, and also people's interest in customization and individuality. But I think it was content that proved that the exploration of style was not just something for the industry, it was actually for the industry with people. So again, I think there's sort of something about bringing in people early and giving them opportunities, not, as we've previously, I think, had issues with in advertising and still can be the case with entertainment, you know, squirreling away and focusing too much just on the crafting. I think finding ways of bringing people in and creating content that is really feels like it's got an inherent connection for them is a good thing. So I guess there's no more Bieber, mainly because I think it's bringing it back. Well, I don't think there is. There's bringing it back really to sort of advertising and this point around the blurring lines. And I think that it's this idea really that a good story starts with the product. And I think this is something we're sort of increasingly seeing. And I think some of it, I think, can feel quite cultural in that people are more and more cynical. There's greater volumes of advertising out there. You know, they're less interested in being disrupted by it. I also think there is that youth point around authenticity and digital meaning that you can find what you want to find. But I think that for us, we've had sort of a lot of success and feel that it's a very powerful way to go, is realise the magic's in the product. You don't need to create too much of a layer of magic over the product or create magic that drives to the product. So the point here is actually how you could keep the product more central. So 2 examples here of that. Back in 2010, ASOS came to us with the brief of wanting to get more guys into the brand because it's very heavily female. And I think, you know, truth is, guys don't really get their inspiration from the same place women do. So we took the approach of looking to where they do get inspiration, and that's actually from more of a street level. So it's more of kind of, you know, sports individuals, like freeform dancing, that side of it. So picked up like casts and dancers, and then basically it was a product demo for the style, for the clothing, but we did it globally and we did it in a way as well that shortcut the purchase process. But I think there's something just interesting there where for clothing, this was a product demo, but also it had built into the entertainment a more immediate means to buy the clothing. So again, it shortcut the whole process. And then I think that another example for us is looking at Axe. And I think here it's just an exercise in how if you can get really upstream and again use kind of customer and consumer insight on product, you begin to start creating content and a story from the very beginning. So the point here was nothing really trumps bragging rights for a guy beyond going to space. So to be honest, product's quite simple. Product is really just a revitalising fragrance, revitalising shower gel. But we talked about that insight as they developed the product. And that then led to baking into the product the call to action that if you bought it, you could sign up for the potential trip to space. So again, it's bringing in the potential for a story and entertainment as early as you possibly can. Another example, so I think similarly with Burberry and really exploring this, and obviously there is something to be said for the fact this was just a year after Christopher Bailey joined. He had a whole point of view on the democratisation of their style, but they created, again, entertainment where product was frankly central. So where catwalks had just been the preserve of the industry and the few and the privileged, basically live streamed their catwalk. Product was entirely central to it, but again, it allowed people to have an experience and kind of explore the product in a way that didn't even necessarily meant that they were going to buy it, but I think that kind of created content and was about entertainment. And I think, there sort of feels no coincidence that the outgoing CEO of Burberry was the highest paid CEO in the UK last year, because it really kind of radicalised some of the conventions that were existing in that industry. On the right-hand side, something here, we got a very lowly print brief for a very spectacular car on Audi. So R8 V10 Plus, they supercharged that car's engine even more, but they just wanted a little print ad. And so I think when you go back to, well, actually, passion, what do people really want to see? They want to get as close to a car like that as they possibly can, even if they have no hope of buying it. So what we created was a print ad with a blipper call to action where you just could hear the engine. That was it. Absolutely phenomenal response. We got the highest response rate Blipper has ever had, became their best case study. Therefore, we simultaneously got the budget to basically do what is, again, a very pure product demo. We put the car on a rolling road, took the back off it, had a very elegant camera panning shot. Maybe I should have had content at this point. Elegant camera panning shot round to the back to basically show the car revving to its maximum and therefore the dual exhausts smoke flaring. And so, again, phenomenally successful. But we've had lots of discussions at the agency, like, oh, is it really advertising? Oh, is there enough creativity in it? And I think probably from a strategy point of view, I'll talk about just briefly the fact that a couple of years ago, we actually had a bit of an issue really in BBH where we talked about strategy being too overbearing. There was too much strategy, it was too dominant. So now we've sort of gone to a phrase of just enough strategy. Now that's been the last few years. I'd arguably say now, when you think about primacy of the product, authenticity, giving people what they really want, which is quite often just a very glorified view, but of that product, we are now in a little bit of an era of just enough creativity. Because I think, this idea of, oh, well, it won't win at awards. And it's like, yes, but it's a phenomenally crafted bit of film that people have loved. And, it had a guy walk off the street after he'd seen it the night before and put down the full amount to buy this car. So they reached their sales targets in the quickest time they ever have for their most expensive model. So it's that idea we kind of created an asset that was for the product, not something just pointed to the product. Last example, we've already touched on Red Bull, but I think that, the idea, just I suppose to reiterate, the idea that they have creating content now that is bought by a network. Again, amazing in terms of realising collaboration between the entertainment industry, the advertising industry, and similarly with the art of flight, that they are getting people to buy that. And so I think that just one final example is looking at The Guardian. They are a content-based brand. But they have got a lot of opportunity in how they evolve their content. So I think that, the content that they have created the opportunity for us to do a product demo with Three Little Pigs. But it also, I think there is something about how can we work with them to evolve their content, their delivery of it, how you get people closer to it. So they sort of they took their basic story and we're looking to supercharge the way in which they deliver that content so that they've got more and more brand opportunities from it. But again, I think it's proof that the product is the magic. It can be. I think you've just got to work very hard to find your insight on that, to identify what people's passion around it might be. It might be sort of secondary to the product, or it might be really inextricably linked. But it's staying really close to that feels like that's a way of then generating entertainment that people really want, rather than just ad-funded content, which I think are slightly different things. So I guess, thanks, Beebs. And I think probably don't really have any final words. I mean, I think there were sort of 5 points there. It just feels that we've kind of got a point of view on what content is, but quite a clear point of view on how you maybe get to entertainment and make it something people would actually spend time with, because it's not just the entertainment industry that are cracking it now. It feels that there's a more of a collaboration by necessity.
I disagree
20 minutes.
completely.
I always wanted to say that. I thought mostly because I guess tonight is a bonfire night, so it's sort of, you should be explosive and dynamic, and it's the closest I'm ever going to get to disagreeing with anyone in Parliament. Well, that's right, because my first slide is really, really straightforward and simple. So, actually, it's really a question, and I wanted to ask all of you. And the simple question I have for you is not only what is content, but what makes good content? Can anyone, while we reboot the computer, what does make good content? The people. The people? Yeah. Okay. So having people in it, or like the people who make it, like the creativity?
Well, if you take a YouTube star, a piece of content from their channel is going to do a lot better than a piece of content that they might put on the brand's channel in a collaboration.
Okay. So I guess where is important as well?
Where and who's talking.
Okay. What else makes good content? Anyone?
Emotional resonance.
Emotional resonance. Okay. So it strikes a chord with the person, strikes a chord in you, and that. So I guess it's relevant to you as well. Sorry. So what did you say? Someone over here? The story. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think the story is really important. I do a big presentation on storytelling, and I think it's key to advertising as well as content. Anyone else? What else is really good content?
It can be,
Sorry, one at a time. Sorry.
A clear intention.
A clear intention. What do you mean?
So the two pieces already have been about whether it's advertising or entertainment.
Right.
Am I trying to elicit somebody falling in love with something, somebody hating something, somebody
Okay.
finding a villain in something?
Right.
What is the intention around that?
So just having a clear point of view, a clear perspective, I guess. Okay. Sorry.
it can be useful as well, because everyone's talking about entertainment, but
Okay.
it can be educational, informative.
Great. So utility. Great. Anyone else? Anything else? Genre.
So a new take on something you're already thinking about.
Okay. Or even I mean, hey, I love fantasy sci-fi. I'll watch pretty much anything that's fantasy sci-fi just to give it a go. A lot of it's crap, but every now and then I'll give everything a go. So okay, genre. I think having a slant perspective. Anyone else? Originality. Okay. I'm a little confused on originality. I think original take. I would say yes, definitely. There's famous 7 story types or something like 9 story types. Anyone else? All right. Well, I've got a few other points, but I think to me all those things are absolutely what make great advertising as well. And my perspective and my point of view is actually increasingly we're in a world where there is no difference between good advertising and good content. I mean, I guess let's go back in time a little bit. So brands and content kind of go back quite a while. So this is one of the very first radio drama productions. This was where the word soap opera came from, right? Everyone probably knows that, yeah? I mean, soap operas came from the fact that original radio dramas were not only presented by, but were produced by, were created for soap brands primarily. And that sort of creation of content was one of the ways that they were able to afford to create so much, but it was also one of the ways that brands were able to sort of connect with people and really begin to have this kind of, they knew that content was so important to people. They knew that that's what they were going to be doing. And luckily for them, there was not really that many channels, right? I mean, when radio was up there, actually when radio originally came out, there was hundreds of channels, but it quickly got down to just a few. As time went on, of course, we saw the same sort of thing happen in television. And not only were soap operas being presented by brands, but we began to see things like, for example, individual ad breaks and the original sort of late night comedy shows were being presented by particular brands. Brands knew that that relationship with content was really, really important. And in fact, I was talking to someone today who comes from a print background, and he was saying even advertorial content in a magazine costs more to buy than traditional content, which I didn't know that advertorial would be any more or less expensive than a traditional ad. But it's because it is created in a tone of voice that is relevant, that is interesting, that is engaging. But it is exactly the sort of thing which a consumer would expect to find in that particular publication. And that's why it's so important, so powerful. But I'm going to take it back even farther, because I think you might suggest something like this is even branded content. So everybody should recognize this, yes? What is it? Altogether, the cysteine. Thank you very much. Yeah. Good. I think this is probably a great example of branded content. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm cheating it a little bit, but really I can't imagine the church looking at this as anything other than a great expression of the message, and in fact, the whole message that they want to get across. I mean, this is it. This is the Bible. This is the beginning of the story right here, right up there on the wall, in an exceptional way, in a way that is so unique and so different than what else. But for people who couldn't read, for people who couldn't experience it in any other way than in Latin, this must have been a really, really powerful way of delivering that message. And I think that's all that we try and do as advertisers, is just relay a message. And content, I think, is the best way of doing that. The problem for me and the challenge I think that we've got is historically speaking, we've been able to advertise around it. We've been able to advertise around content. But as we get more and more channels, it's increasingly difficult to get the penetration. It's increasingly difficult to get the message out to everywhere that we once were able to do. And so actually, we have to think of other ways of doing it. The other thing about this proliferation is I guess brands can almost be anywhere now. So I was deciding really between the picture of the house with a big ad on it, or the picture of the guy who tattooed himself for a brand. And then I started looking for tattoos and brands, and I realized some guy had done eye Google on his shoulder. I felt so bad for the guy after we killed the product. It was really embarrassing for him. He must have felt horrible. But I mean, like, the truth is we can be almost anywhere. Brands are literally at every place you turn. And I think it's going to only increase. It's only going to become worse. But there's a huge backlash to this as well, which is basically we have become increasingly resistant to advertising. And this is a challenge which I think everyone has to raise and has to sort of learn to deal with. I mean, I'm probably the worst case scenario for Sky. I literally do not watch anything live unless something has gone horribly, horribly wrong with my Sky Plus. But I cannot tell you the last time. And in fact, Sky On Demand's even better because I can record a program and then I've waited 2 weeks and I go, oh, I've got 2 episodes. I'll delete the ones I've got, go on demand to completely skip the ad break. I don't even have to fast forward it that way. As a society, we are really, really looking for every way we can to avoid ads. And as we've talked about tonight, things like Spotify, we can opt out of those ads now. And so consumers really, really don't want the ads. We're doing everything we can. And this is a really interesting clash of us going, well, fine, we're going to put an ad on a house. You can't ignore that every day when you get home, can you? But the truth is nobody really, really wants it. And so I think the challenge we have, and I should have added at the beginning, I think this is going to be very, very short because I think my point is quite simple, is we have to really compel attention. And we had 2 great pictures. I'm not sure which one wins. Is it Dirty Harry or Darth Vader? Who wins that battle? Is it Darth Vader? But I think what we have to do is to really try and compel attention wherever possible. And I think we have to compel attention whether we're creating content or whether we're creating advertising. And that really, for me, is the big job we have. And so I think, actually, the challenge we have is that I believe content is just as interruptive as an ad. The reality, though, is we enjoy that interruption. When a really good movie stops us in our tracks, we will. I see it all the time, and even not even necessarily great movies. I'm sitting at the breakfast table. Sometimes a cartoon that I haven't seen, that my 6-year-old daughter's watching, comes on, and I'll be watching it compelled, even though my wife is talking to me and telling me important things I should be paying attention to. And it annoys her, but the truth is that content is really, really pulling me in. It's sucking me into that world. Now, okay, Jake and the Neverland Pirates may not be the sort of pinnacle of great content, but the truth is it does the exact same job. It pulls people in, and that's what we need to do with our advertising. The truth is instead of just interrupting somebody and letting them go by, we've got to interrupt them and continue to pull them through. Recently, we've seen stats like 54% of ads on the internet aren't even seen. They're completely skipped over. And so what you're finding is that more and more people are creating individual, unique, bespoke ways of advertising, because ways that actually fit into the tenor of the site or the place where you are. So I won't talk too much about our own products, but things like TrueView, I think, is an exact example of that. It's an attempt by us to create a product which actually lives in a unique way, but also gives consumers control at the same time. More and more often, consumers are having that control. AdBlock Plus, the extension for Firefox and Chrome, allows you to opt out, but it also allows you to opt in. Because actually, I really like that site. I know as a consumer that they get money from advertising. I'm going to choose to listen to and watch advertising on that site because I know that it's beneficial for them. At the same time, we don't have that problem with a TrueView ad because it's a YouTube video. And so what we encourage people to do is actually create content that matters, content that's going to be relevant. We've seen 3-hour TrueView videos. Who's seen the 3-hour TrueView video? Anyone? If you've not seen it, it's a phenomenal, interesting thing. TrueView video is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 skip, right? There's a 3-hour video of a man stirring a pot. It is one of the best examples of advertising I've ever seen because it's totally fit for purpose. And nobody expects them to watch it for 3 hours, but it doesn't matter because after 11.5 seconds they get charged. But they also get counted as a view after 30 seconds. And so creating interesting content and sticking it in there allows people to have a way and a relationship with something. And as a brand, I think that's what we're encouraging people to do. More and more, we're asking brands to create advertising that is actually content, because I think that is the way forward. So I think there's a couple things you probably should be aware of. We talked about some of the stuff earlier, but I think great content is absolutely the right length. So one of my favorite stories ever, and in fact, Hemingway's favorite story. Everyone know this story? So he said this was the best story he ever wrote. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Perfect story. Tells everything in 6 words. He thought it was the most compelling thing that he'd ever done. And I think great ads have that kind of thing as well. So this, of course, is from Dove Sketches. Everyone's seen it. It's 3-4 minutes of film. It is the perfect length, though, for that particular moment. Just like that 3-hour film. The 3-hour film, let me tell you about it. It's basically for a product called Eagle brand Dulce de Leche. And the premise of the product is simply this. You can make dulce de leche for your pudding. It will take you 3 hours of stirring condensed milk in a pot. Or you can open a can of dulce de leche right now. And so that's what they do. They have a can, and right next to it, they have a pot of condensed milk, and they spend the next 3 hours stirring it. And you watch, and at the end of 3 hours, I promise you, he will still be stirring it. He moves his hands around a little bit and shakes his fingers and everything that you'd expect. I can't imagine what they had to pay a model for 3 hours of that. And then at the end of it, they go, OK, great, your dulce de leche is nearly done. In 2 hours, it'll be cool, and then you can serve it. Or, of course, you can use dulce de leche, Eagle brand, right now, out of a can. Now, that was the perfect length for that message. 3 hours, it could not have been anything less. I'm not suggesting everyone go out and do 3-hour ads right now. I want to be clear about that. But actually, how long does your ad need? How long do you need to create compelling content? We have more and more platforms that allow you to create the right length of content at the right time. And I think that's why content is so interesting and exciting for me. I think good content has to be delivered in the right format. So can you tell what that is? Anyone? A pop-up book. Right? I mean, I can't imagine that story looking any better any other way. A pop-up book is just a phenomenal, you can't take a pop-up book any other way than actually as a pop-up story. And to me, that is exactly the right format. And I think more and more ads are looking at it as well. So one of the last things I was able to work on at AMV, and it seems slightly sacrilegious to talk about Twitter here, but anyway, is this campaign here. So most people probably have some familiarity with this campaign, but what we did for this was we went onto Twitter and found a number of 5 different celebrities, one of them being Katie Price, and actually took over their Twitter streams for 5 tweets. And so for 5 tweets, 4 tweets, we gave completely anonymous, sort of strange things for them to be talking about. Katie Price and quantitative easing and the debt crisis were not exactly her normal topics. So after 4 tweets of that, we announced and revealed that actually she wasn't feeling herself, and after a snicker, she was back to her normal tweeting. This could not have been delivered and given in any other way than in Twitter. If this had been like 5 ads we'd taken out on television, it would have just been weird. But actually, because there was a place, because there was a mechanism for us to do this, we had the exact right format to be able to deliver this kind of content. I think also content being delivered at the right time. So everybody know the tiger who went to tea? Oh, I didn't know this. This must be a British story. But this is absolutely the right story for my 3-year-old. He loves this book. My 6-year-old, on the other hand, the time is gone. She's not interested in the tiger who went to tea anymore. Or came to tea. And I guarantee sort of a 15-year-old I met on the street would be even less interested in it. And only until I became a parent was it relevant for me. Finding the right time to deliver the message is just as important as actually anything else when you're doing it. And I think great ads are being delivered at the right time as well. And to me, this is content. Right? So you know when this was out. Ann Summers ran a whole series of these to talk about a particular moment in time. And they did it with search, they did it with, but ensure it was the right format, ensure it was the right message, but it was guaranteed to be the right time. I think when you're creating content, figure out what it is, where the time is, where is it going to be delivered, and where is it going to be best. The Jonathan Ross thing, I think they got the time right. I'm not sure that necessarily they got the right format, but they definitely got the time right. They could not have delivered that in any other place and time other than at that ad break between the Jonathan Ross show. Look, I think, at the end of the day, I think all that content really is, all that really good content is something that you want. Whether it's useful, whether it's something interesting or not. I think all it is that something that people want. And what we're finding more and more is that actually people want really good ads. And those are really good ads in search, they're really good ads on YouTube, they're really good ads in any place you can go. Better ads, from our perspective, get rewarded. We have a thing called quality score. So a YouTube ad, a TrueView ad that gets watched more often, gets cheaper to serve. We charge you less for it. And the same thing happens on many, many other platforms as well. We reward people for making great content. And that, to me, is the ultimate expression of what you should be looking for, is to create things, content, ads that people want. At least you think that it's just me. I think I'll go back 50 or so years to Howard Gossage. And I'm glad no one else used the quote tonight, because it was too perfect, I thought. Which is actually, realistically, people read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad. And I think the exact same thing is true now. How many people here have gone onto YouTube looking for an ad? Okay, maybe it's the wrong room to ask that question, but I think most people would say that around the world. Thank you, guys.
Don't go, Nate. Don't go.
Oh.
Would you like to join me back on the platform, speakers?
Should we?
I'm sure after that magnificently interesting, contrasting, but somehow always interlocking series of thoughts and themes, you will have many questions. And I will give you, and I will stand, so please, Kirsty, sit. I'll give you about 15 or 20 seconds to think, because that's how long it takes normally for the first person to be brave enough to put up their hand and ask the question. So who'd like to start? Over there, please. Hang on a minute, we'll just wait for the microphone so we can hear what you have to say.
Hi. It's just an observation, really, which is that we haven't touched on user-generated content at all in this, or it seems to me. And one of the most interesting things I've seen recently, and I'm no expert, is Vice Media, who produce a news channel, which is produced by young people who have got involved in creating news around the world for their market, because news in this country is consumed by older people. And I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was fascinating that young people can create their own content, and that sort of relates firmly back into what they want. So, but it isn't something that we've touched on particularly this evening.
Nate, would you like to?
User-generated. I think. So I guess there's two different sides to that. I think a lot of brands have been burned with user-generated content. I think it's varied. I think the other problem with user-generated content, there's a couple problems with it, is quality. When you're working with creating content, whether you're working with someone who isn't necessarily a professional in the traditional sense, like YouTube celebrities or partners, I think you've got somewhat less of a concern when you just literally open it up. And there have been some really horrible examples of brands that have been massively burned by that. The other problem is what you find is actually with user-generated content is there's a massive trade-off between the number of people who are going to create content and the number of people who are going to be seeing it. So you've got to figure out a way of balancing those two things out. That being said, I think that there are still interesting user-generated things happening. So you talked about news, and I guess one of the questions I would have is, where do you draw that line of what is a user? So is a YouTube celebrity, are they 10 YouTube celebrities or people who are making interesting content on YouTube, are those users? Maybe, and then often, in fact, they often are because they choose only specific brands to deal with. But I think those would be my biggest concerns with, actually, I think in many ways we've kind of gone past that world. There will still be great campaigns that do it, but I think that's probably
Kirsty,
a little bit old.
to interject?
I think there's a little bit of a difference in that everybody there was a zeitgeist for UGC for campaigns, whereas I think now there's something more interesting about when it has a certain scope and it's more about fueling an ongoing platform. I also think that's the slight difference. I feel that the production quality that you get from it, the sort of volatility of how you manage it and what you can expect from it, I feel that's gone from campaigns. But I think when you look at something like ASOS, for example, a lot of that's UGC. It functions really well for that brand and for what they're about. So I think it's maybe about knowing its place.
Not a huge amount to add, just I suppose talking to brands recently about everything from UGC and crowdsourcing, and it kind of makes to a certain extent, it makes you nervous because actually exactly what you were saying, how do you control it, what actually gets through, what's good enough. If you're trying to do something for a brand, that becomes a tough area, but obviously that also filters through into, you sometimes find amazing talent within that actually then grows. Most people probably who started YouTube channels started off doing UGC at some point. And also there's a whole kind of social side to that as well, and how you, so it's kind of morphed, I think, into slightly different things. Yep. But clearly you want people to engage, and if that's the way they're engaging, that's a good thing. And sometimes you find some gold in there, but there's a lot of mess as well.
Just taking advantage of the fact that the microphone's next to me already. So, but I wonder if there's a question about where does the expertise exist in the whole constellation of agencies and suppliers and providers of content. So, if in your early examples, Nick, there's the world of advertising and there's the world of broadcasting, then those are two places where content used to come from. And then there was UGC, which seemed to be a new place that content could come from. But I just wondered what everybody thinks about where content can now come from, because it could be ad agencies, but it might be difficult. Could be broadcasters or people who supply broadcasters. But so where could content come from, Daddy?
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to some of the points I was making about agencies having to change, because I think whether you're a broadcaster, a creative agency, a media agency, you have a base in media that is clearly your strength, but actually those bases are no longer enough for any of those organizations really to thrive into the future. So they're all having to learn those new skills or bring in those new skills. And I think what you're seeing a rush to the center ground of basically everybody who's in media in one shape or form or another, and they come from a particular strength and they've got to learn the new skills. So from my point of view, I absolutely see why couldn't an advertising agency, not right now, it's not the right time, but in 5 years, 6 years time, be actually making everything from a TV show through to an advert. And equally, why couldn't a producer from a traditional television production background, not an advertising television production, but one who just makes TV shows, also get into that space? I think the lines are absolutely blurring, and it will all come down to understanding brands, understanding audiences, understanding entertainment, and actually, the good point, engagement, because engagement and entertainment are interwoven.
Kirsty, do you want to pick up on engagement, or do you think you've said your piece on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think from a sort of agency perspective, I think it is just about recognising how you craft formats and how you sort of fit with, best content, best place, that sort of thing. But I think starting with understanding people and where their interest lies, I do think that's a strength from within agencies, but learning how to manage that, so that you kind of don't overplay or underplay the opportunity.
I think if 2010 or 2011 were the great social media bun fights, I suspect 2013 and 14 are the great content bun fights. And I mean, we're seeing content divisions in media agencies, we see them within advertising agencies, we see them coming from much more traditional places like Channel 4. I suspect that we're going to continue to see lots and lots of people try and do this. And I think as Nick has alluded to, everybody has their own strengths. Everybody comes at it from a different perspective, and not everybody's going to get it right all the time. But I suspect we're going to see it come from a lot of different places before it shakes down.
Gentleman here.
Probably slightly more boring and tactical question based on the content. Nick, you mentioned measurement quite early on, and Kirsty, you mentioned the difference between kind of this land grab for likes. And I'm just seeing in a lot of the work that I do, this kind of this construct of what measurement really is and what constitutes a really good metric and how that drives ROI and all that yada 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 yada. We're constantly talking about content and how engaging it is or how entertaining it is. How does that then drive ROI for clients, or is that far too far down the line of the long tail for it to really give a shit, and what we should be focusing on is just making entertaining content? What's your point of view on that?
Nate?
I mean, we've seen some, so I guess if I go back to the Dove example, that is one of the great case studies which we're touting around in terms of a client and a brand that created a piece of content, spent a lot of money advertising it, pushed it out there, and has seen a great ROI as a result. They're very pleased with it. They're very, very excited. They're going to be coming back and doing a lot more of it. In fact, their entire model for how they approach advertising on YouTube is changing now to be much more reactive. So one of the interesting things they're doing is going, where is content becoming successful? And so they created a kind of a social media hit squad, which basically looked at where this particular piece of film was being successful and going, okay, it's actually really, really kicking off right now in Puerto Rico. So we're going to put lots of advertising budget behind Puerto Rico for the next, and then like hour by hour evaluating it. Yeah. Suddenly 3 hours later going, okay, Puerto Rico is no longer interesting. Let's go to Germany because that's where it's happening. Yeah. And actually being much more reactive about it. So from their perspective, they were very, very pleased, very happy about it. So I think actually the two things can work really well. What we don't recommend, and we would because we're a media owner, but also because we've seen success, is not advertising. So Samsung's another great example of somebody who has gone absolutely gangbusters with live events, advertising an extreme amount. Obviously, they've got incredibly deep pockets, so they can afford to do it. But their live launch of the S4 and of their Galaxy Watch have seen huge numbers driven by advertising around the world. That's been really successful for them. But we've seen equal examples of people who've created live content that have not done any advertising, and funny enough, nobody turns up. So I think content is not the end. It is probably the beginning and the sort of method by which people want to consume advertising today.
Yeah, probably just echo that really, because I think it's not to get distracted by it as the only means for success. Because I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that we're just increasingly obsessed by is the connectivity of every bit of communication we put out, which sounds very simple, but I think planning for that connectivity, constantly monitoring the connectivity, you know, no good having a piece of content out there if you haven't got the right call to action, or if it hasn't got a proximity to what you want people to then go and do. So I think it's just, you know, as we sort of, you know, we're always quite sort of swayed by the different trends, I think, in the industry. And it is a bit of a trend right now, content, but it's recognising it has a place in the ecosystem that is everything else and that still needs to function exceptionally well. So similar point, but yeah, for us, it's just the connectedness of it.
And I suppose what I was talking about earlier is the same thing, really. I mean, you need to have that whole kind of chain. So one side, you do have your clear brand message. At the other, it's about understanding the brand, credibility, those kind of things, so that actually when they're going to purchase, maybe they like that brand more, maybe they understand that brand more. But I do think there are certain brands that lend themselves better to content than the others. I mean, Red Bull has made itself a kind of content brand, really. But also a small example of there wasn't anything else around this. It was just an advertiser-funded show that the Home Office did called Beat Life on the Street probably about 6 years ago now, 5 years ago. Now, they used to just take out print ads, and they used to just say, become a policeman or a community service officer. And they did that TV series, and they got the same take-up in people applying to actually become police officers in 2 months compared to what would normally take them in a year. And that was purely because people could see inside the lives of what this job meant. You couldn't do that in advertising the same way. But again, I'd say beware the brand that says, let's put it all into content and do no advertising. With my caveat that it's all content, but hardcore advertising, because actually the two do a really valuable job together.
Does that all presuppose basically having bottomless pockets to be able to create great content and put a bucket load of cash behind advertising?
Well, that's one of the issues, and again, talking about the cost of production and how you actually do that. And I think, you know, sometimes media agencies need to be challenged in the way they've got to. My experience is often a very traditional way of approaching things. I think there is a huge amount of value in, particularly in things like YouTube and earned media and all those kind of things, and there has to be a better recognition of where that value is and how the whole balance is in place. And I think, you know, there is a very clear, strong question there, and each brand has to make its own decision about where it needs to put its weight.
I mean, I think from our perspective, we've seen some real success with very, very surprisingly affordable content creation on YouTube. I think advertising agencies are always amazed at the day rate that some of these people want. Like, really? That's all? Okay, wow. And that often includes not only the day rate of the person, but they're going to shoot that video for you. They're going to create that content. So I don't think content necessarily has to be, you know, incredible Dove sort of full 5-minute films. It can be a guy in his bedroom talking about Crave.
Okay. John. Emily.
Great first slide, I thought, where you're opposing messaging versus entertainment, as if they're kind of irreconcilable opposites. 20 years ago, a significant proportion of the population would agree with the statement that the ads are better than the programs. I suppose my question for the panel is, how do we get here where commercial messaging is so crap that everyone's trying to avoid it? And is there a way of reversing it? Because it just seems to me that the golden age of British advertising was exactly about saying that people loved commercial communications and it clicked. So can we get it back?
That's a big question.
No.
No, I think it's...
I don't think so. I think the biggest problem is the proliferation of channels. So with hundreds of channels requiring that much more advertising and not that many more advertisers who can actually afford to spend to fill that same gap, that we're never going to get back to that place. Also, I think the world has changed in terms of production, which gives us the ability, in theory, to make better things, but it also gives everybody the chance to make cheaper things, more shit things cheaply.
I mean, I also think there's a little bit of a curse of measurement as well. I think a lot of it, from our point of view, we would say it comes down to something like research. So back to Kevin Spacey's point, because you can be so calculated and measure your success so greatly and get to creating such a formula, the kind of creative leaps and the kind of vision that creative people were entitled to have previously is often inhibited now. And I think that's just why, I suppose that sort of thought around the ads being better than programming, obviously that was in broadcasting. I think that's why now the proliferation of channels is where hopefully the opportunity is, because you can have sort of more broader forays into what is more creative stuff, certainly, than on the big paid-for channels. And also that's just because clients can measure stuff so much more. They want to just know the kind of the ROI and exactly what they can anticipate getting for their budget so much more. So everything's kind of got a bit more uptight on that side of it, I think.
But also, I suppose what we were talking about, that this whole thing is, what is the difference in content and advertising? And actually, can they be the self-same thing, just with a slightly different approach? You could argue there could be a new golden age of advertising where actually the advertising is, everything from the YouTube channel to the TV show to the ad is all part of that same thing. It's just time has moved on, and actually that very clear world everyone lived in, which is the Mad Men world of we make the ads, you make the TV shows, there's the print, there's the press. It was a simpler, less complicated time, but maybe I'd argue there's room for a new golden age, just much broader.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up, because you could not have done a more perfect ending for me. Thank you to our three speakers for a really brilliant and entertaining and wonderful walk around the houses of this very complicated subject. And I think I do feel quite inspired by what you have to say. I've learned an awful lot, and it's given me a load to think about, and I hope that you'll have taken away a similar thing yourselves. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great to see you all. We have 2 more Noisy Thinkings before Christmas. The first is the 27th of November. And we're going to be asking, when or why did planning get so small? Is new tech crowding out big thinking? So that's just a little tiny question for us to consider. We've got some fantastic speakers that evening. We'll be advertising that shortly. And then we have a special event for Christmas, which I'm not going to reveal yet, but which is going to be involving the young people in our community. So all will be revealed in the next couple of weeks. Thank you for coming, and good to see you all. Good night.